Hello, I am recording the video and today's topic is constructor. In base class object oriented programming, a constructor is a special type of subroutine called to create an object. It prepares the new object for use, often accepting argument that the constructor uses to set required member variables. A constructor resembles an instance method, but it differs from a method in that it has no explicit return type. It is not implicitly inherited and it usually has different rules for scope modifiers. Constructors often have the same name as the declaring the class. They have the task of initializing the object's data members and of establishing the invariant of the class, failing if the invariant is invalid. A properly written constructor leaves the resulting object in a valid state. Immutable objects must be initialized in a constructor. Most languages allows overloading the constructor and that there can be more than one constructor for a class with a differing parameter. Some languages take consideration of some special type of constructor. Constructors which concretely use a single class to create an object and return a new instance of the class are abstracted by factories, which also created objects but can do so in various ways using multiple classes or different allocation scheme such as an object pool. Parameterized constructor that can take at least one argument are termed as parameterized constructor. When an object is declared in a parameterized constructor, the initial values have to be passed as argument to the constructor function. The normal way of object declaration may not work. The constructor can be called explicitly or implicitly. The method of calling the constructor implicitly is also called the shorthand method. Undefault constructor. If the programmer does not supply a constructor on an instantiable class, Java compiler insert a default constructor into your code on your behalf. This constructor is known as default constructor. You would not find it in your source code, as it would be inserted into the code during compilation and exist in class file. The behavior of the default constructor is language dependent. It may initialize data members to 0 or other some values, or it may do nothing at all. In Java, default constructor refer to a nullary constructor that is automatically generated by the compiler if no constructor have been defined for the class or the absence of any programmer defined constructor. For example, in Java, the default constructor implicitly calls the superclass nullary constructor. The executes an empty body. All fields are left at their initial value of 0, 0.0, false or null. Copy constructor. Like C++, Java also supports copy constructor, but unlike C++, Java doesn't create a default copy of constructor if you don't write your own. Copy constructor defines the action performed by the compiler when copying class objects. A copy constructor has one formal parameter, that is the type of the class. The parameter may be a reference to an object. It is used to create a copy of an existing object of the same class. Even though both classes are the same, it counts as a conversion constructor, while copy constructors are usually abbreviated copy. They have nothing to do with the class constructor used in .NET using the same abbreviation. Conversion constructor. Conversion constructor provide a mean for a compiler to implicitly write an object belonging to the one class based on a object of a different type. These constructors are usually invoked implicitly to convert argument or operands to an appropriate type, but they may also be called explicitly. A constructor is a like instance method that usually has the same name as class and can be used to set the values of the members of an object either to default or use defined values. However, although it reassembles it, a constructor is not a proper method since it doesn't have return type. Instead of performing a task by executing code, the constructor initializes the object and it cannot be static, final, abstract, and synchronized. Constructors are not called explicitly and are invoked only once during their lifetime. In the case of a hierarchy of classes where a derived class inherits from a parent class, the execution sequence of the constructor is called to the constructor of the parent class first and then that of the derived class. Constructor cannot be inherited. Users do not need to write constructors for every class. A constructor can be declared using any of the access modifiers. It is mandatory to have a constructor with the right access modifier. However, the compiler supplies a default if an access modifier is not defined in the class and a constructor is not declared. This default constructor cannot be found inside the source code since it's found in the class file. Its behavior depends on the language. Although it's often mistaken for a default constructor, in Java constructor with no arguments also exist and are called no arg constructors. While they share the signature with the default constructor, the body of no arg constructors isn't empty and they can have any code. Constructor with arguments instead are known as parameterized constructor. If a constructor is declared as a private, this class cannot be created or derived and hence cannot be initiated. Such a constructor, however, can be overloaded with a different set of parameters. Thank you.